Okay, folks, it's time for another basic concept video. I want to talk about the difference in active and passive transport. Active needs the cell to use energy. I'll give you an example of this. The sodium potassium pump is a great example. In a sodium potassium pump, the cell is spending ATP to pump sodium out of the cell to where there's already a lot of sodium and potassium into the cell where there's already a lot of potassium. This is powered by ATP, and the fact that you're moving where there's less of stuff to where there's more, that means each chemical is moving up its concentration gradient. And that's why energy is required. That's active transport. Um Now if you look back here, oh, let's see that. There we go. You'll see that in active transport, you could have protein pumps like we just talked about, the sodium potassium pump. You could also have vesicles for active transport. But what we mean by that is if you're doing endocytosis, exocytosis, you are moving big pieces of the membrane. Say you're doing endocytosis, you have to change the cytoskeleton to pull the membrane in to grab things that are outside the cell. If you're doing exocytosis, you have to move vesicles with motor proteins. That takes energy. And then you have to change the cytoskeleton as you fuse with the plasma membrane and dump the stuff outside. So both endocytosis and exocytosis are forms of active transport. And that's something you should remember. The other thing I want to point out is that with passive transport, you're not spending energy from the cell. The cell does not spend energy. A lot of um, a lot of ion channels, they allow things to move without the cell spending any energy to do it. So you see ions going from an area of high concentration, moving to an area of lower concentration. You don't have to spend energy to make them go. They just want to spread out. They have the same charges, they want to spread out. That's going to happen. Passive transport, we have that, like I said, ion channels, but also glucose transporters, aquaporins, things like that. And they're passive because they're moving things down the gradient from where there's more to where there's less. There are three big types of passive transport. One of those would be osmosis, which is the movement of water. Most passive we would call diffusion, where things go from a high concentration to a lower, go down the gradient. And then you could also have facilitated transport, or in the old days we called it facilitated diffusion, but it's things moving from high to low through a channel that helps them pass through. So if it's ordinary diffusion, they can pass right through the membrane. That would be something small, nonpolar. It goes through that pretty well. If it's a polar thing, it's going to have to need some help. It's going to need to be facilitated, and it's going to get through by going through a channel protein, something like these ion channels in this diagram. Anyway, I hope that explains passive and active to you guys. Passive, no energy from the cell, active, energy from the cell. And we've got examples of both of those. And we'll talk more later.